Hi, my name is Anne Fouillou and I'm working at the Similar Research Laboratory in Oslo in Norway, and I will talk about ROHub, a research object hub to manage and preserve your research work, to make it available to everyone and to discover new knowledge. So let's start with some motivation. As a climate data scientist, I would like to find and access existing work and not only scientific paper. So for instance, if I find a Jupyter notebook in Google or in the European Open Science Explorer, the first thing I would like to do is to re-execute it, so to reproduce it with the same computational environment. And then I want to reuse it, for instance, with different data sets, and I want eventually to update the Jupyter notebook with different collaborators. And then I will cite the original work and publish my new finding, and I will publish it in ROHub, so in this research object repository. And you can see here a research object where you have a title. It's a live research object, and it is an executable research object. It has a resource that can be executed, such as a Jupyter notebook. To make it easier for reuse, it is organized in different folders. We have a biblio folder, an input folder with links to external data sets that you can use in the Jupyter notebook, a tool folder and output folder. It has a lot of metadata, and in particular metadata that has been discovered by the text mining service, and this is to facilitate reuse and to be able to discover other research objects of interest for your work. And it can be forked and it can be enriched, and it can evolve as your research evolves. So here, this is a research object with a different view, and this is really to show you that in a research object, you can aggregate different types of resources. For instance, at the beginning of your research, you may only have some IDs, some bibliographical resources, and then you can add some data, then you have maybe some software, models, workflows, services, and all these different resources can be linked to each other. So typically, for instance, a Jupyter notebook can have some requirement. The Jupyter notebook will have a computational environment that is needed for the re-execution, and from time to time, because it evolves as your research evolves, you can take a snapshot and get a digital object identifier in Zenodo. So we are using this ROHub, this research object repository, and the representation of the research object is done through ROCreate, research object create. If you want to know more about research object, you can check out the chapter on the research object in the Turing way. Here, this is an example. I'm studying the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown on air quality, and I wanted to use Copernicus data that I have never used before. So Simone created a very small example on how to use Copernicus air quality data from the Adam platform, which is a data cube service. And from this, I derived some new work, and I invited other collaborators, and we created a new Jupyter notebooks where we study the impact of COVID-19 lockdown on air quality. This research object also has a lot of metadata. It can be shared. So it has a persistent identifier, even so it is not archive, or it is not a snapshot. So it doesn't have a digital object identifier, but we can always share and reuse. You can see the different folders. And here, for instance, in the input folder, you can see this small cube. And if I click on the cube, I can open this input data in a given resource. So it is associated here to the Adam platform data cube service, which allows me to browse the data set. And in particular, I can go back in time. I can browse the different dates and geographical region. So it is really very helpful to for a new user to analyze already visually the data and get an idea of what has been used in the Jupyter notebook. if I click on the Jupyter Notebook, I will have the similar, so I can associate a Jupyter Notebook with a service. So we have a rendered version using Jupyter Book, but if you want to reuse and re-execute, you can click on the resource and you can either go to the resource, for instance, on GitHub, or execute this in a service such as Binder. So here, EGI Notebook, and you will have something very similar than before. You can reuse, reproduce a Jupyter Notebook and eventually change the Jupyter Notebook and save it in a forked research object. As you can see here, the Jupyter Notebook is well structured, and this is something we have learned along the way. It's really very important to have a well organized and to have best practices when we are writing Jupyter Notebook. And for this, we have teamed up with the Environmental Data Science Book, which is an initiative led by Alejandro Coca Castro from the Alan Turing Institute. So here we define some best practices. This is a community-driven initiative. So this is really a community of practice on how to organize the Jupyter Notebook, how to cite and add all the different collaborators. There is a very light collaborative review process before the publication, where you will get a research object and a digital object identifier. So if you follow these best practices, it's much easier to reuse different research objects and combine them. So for instance, here we have done a study on the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown, but not only on the air quality, but also on the water quality. And for this, I worked with Federica and Giorgio, and we combined two research objects, and we created a new research object, so a new Jupyter Notebook, where we could compare different species, both from the water quality point of view and the air quality point of view. And we created a new research object that we also deposited in ROHub. If you want to know more, you can check out the demo that you have the link here. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I can take any question. Thank you.